Hi, welcome back to Forest Tactical. Today, I wanted to address some of the issues with my zeroing video and try to flesh out the topic a little bit more. After reading the comments and looking into it deeper and developing a deeper understanding on zeroing and what's actually happening in the process, I realized that I had definitely oversimplified the issue. Now, while a lot of the key points of that video are still true, and I'll explain some of those going down the line here, there are certain aspects of that video that neglect key points, things that you need to know while you're zeroing your handgun and really determining what distance you want to do that at. First and foremost, I just wanted to go over the purpose of putting out that video. The reason I put it out was because I heard a lot of rumors about 25-yard zeros having a really weird point of impact from closer distances. Like if you're shooting at 7 yards, you're going to be aiming here and hitting down here. And through my experience shooting handguns, that's just not true at all. But the point of the video was to talk about point of impacts and the importance of knowing your point of impact and where you're going to hit on target. Because I think knowledge is power in that aspect. If you don't know exactly where you're going to hit at different distances, it causes you to doubt yourself and it causes a lot of issues. Through the course of making the video, I expanded that a lot into a zeroing video, and I went into things and simplified things in a way that I thought made sense. But looking back now, was oversimplification, and in a lot of ways it doesn't actually address the issue or explain zeroing at all. And so I wanted to address some of those things. So we'll start off with what's happening with the trajectory of your bullet as it's leaving the muzzle. So if you're having it flat, it's going to look like a straight line that's slowly dropping off due to gravity. But as you know, our sights sit above the muzzle, and so we're trying to figure out a point where those meet up. In the video, I tried to simplify showing how those things intersect by drawing a line from where the optic's looking down to your point of impact. In that video, I neglected to mention two very key aspects. One, that your optic isn't the thing that's actually looking down and intersecting, and two, that your bullet travel actually goes up and down, forming an arc. So let's talk about those things right now. What's actually happening is the optic is looking in a straight line. You're not bending it down or up or anything like that. It's always going to be looking in a straight line, but to get it to match up with where your point of impact is, you're tilting the barrel up. So at closer ranges, you're actually making it look up to meet up with where that optic is looking, and you'll get what's called a dual zero. So it'll impact at 7 yards. The bullet will continue to rise and rise and rise. That's why you have an offset where it hits higher when you back up from 7 yards until ultimately the trajectory comes down again. And that's called the dual zero, where it's going to hit where you're aiming further down the range. So it's actually the arc that you're trying to capture with the optic that's looking straight across, not the other way around. When I made the original video, the point was to show that the overall deviation when you start messing with zeros that are really close to the target are going to be greater than if you backed up and did a zero at a further distance away. That still remains true, but it didn't fully flesh out what was happening, that optic's looking straight across and you're actually trying to capture your bullet trajectory, moving the barrel up and down. So it's important to acknowledge that the bullet actually has an arc due to the way you're tipping the barrel based on your zeroing distance. I still like a 25-yard zero because using a ballistics calculator, I was able to see that it barely starts traveling up, meets up, and never really has a dual zero. And it kind of just stays flat all the way through 25 yards, and there's never really going to be a point where your point of impact's higher than your point of aim. You come closer, like a 15-yard zero, you will have a dual zero. It'll hit at 15 yards and it will continue to rise, meaning at 25, 30 yards away, you might be a little higher than where you're aiming, and then it's going to dip down around 36 yards is where it meets up again, and that's your dual zero. Now there's benefits to that. If you're in competition where you're shooting longer distances, you're going to want that to be a 15-yard zero. You zero it a little bit closer because then you're not having to worry about the offset as much at 50 yards. So why I like a 25-yard zero is the overall deviation from 25 yards and in is the least amount that you're possibly going to have, at least with my bullet grain and with the way that my optic sits on my gun. Now every gun's going to be slightly different. So you may ask, what's the point of going into this deeper? Well, you learn that it's apples and oranges with these things. 15-yard zeros are good, 25-yard zeros are good. I just needed to explain better, and I failed to do so in the first video of exactly what's happening. No, the optic is not looking down to meet up with the bullet trajectory, and no, it's not just a straight trajectory. Once you start messing with elevation, no matter where you're at, 7, 15, 25 yards, you're having to tilt that barrel up to meet up with where your optic is seeing. Oftentimes that creates a dual zero, But like I said, with my bullet grain and the way my optic sits on top of my gun, it's actually not a dual zero at that point. It kind of just stays flat. And that's why I like a 25-yard zero. Anything from 25 and in, I don't have to worry about offset. At 3 yards, maybe I'll have to factor it in if I really needed to take an accurate shot, but it really didn't matter for me. So to summarize, the bullet travel, if you're just shooting a level gun, is going to go straight out and slowly dip off. Because the optic's just looking straight out, you're trying to meet your trajectory with where that optic is looking straight across. By coming at a 7-yard zero, you're tilting that barrel way up in order to meet at a sooner distance. At a 25-yard zero, you're not tilting the barrel as much. That was the point of the first video, was to show that, but I oversimplified that in a way that neglected the very purpose and the way that we zero. It's important to note that I am not a ballistics channel. I'm not a ballistics expert. I've learned a lot more about zeroing and pistol zeroing in particular since I made that video, but the purpose of this channel is for training. I wanted to go over the 25-yard zero and why I like it and offsets, because it's so important to know where your offset is. For the longest time, I didn't understand my offset. And by not understanding my offset, I couldn't guarantee my hits at varying distances. Since I understood where my offset was, my skills have increased tenfold because I know exactly where that bullet's going to go. I know exactly where I'm going to hit. That was the purpose of making the video. I hope that clears up the issue a little bit more and some of the mistakes I made in the original video, and I hope that flushes out what zeroing actually looks like with a handgun. Your zero distance is a personal preference. You may have different reasons for why you want the distance that you choose. At 7 yards, I can understand that. If you're a guy that likes to shoot a handgun clear out to 100 yards or 50 yards away, I can understand you wanting a 7-yard zero. But just understand a 7-yard zero is probably better for greater distances. If you're someone who likes the 15-yard zero, which is a nice sweet medium, I totally understand why you like that zero. It's great. You can hit things out to 50 yards a little bit easier, and there's not a drastic increase in deviation. It's almost identical as the 25-yard zero. And if you're a 25-yard zero like myself, because I like that it's sweet and simple and it's only going to impact lower, it's not going to go higher at any point, then great. I'm glad that you like the 25-yard zero too. But I stick by what I said in the first video. Just understand your offsets. It's super important to know that. It's important to have confidence, because if you don't have confidence and you don't know where you're going to hit at varying distances, it's going to throw you off. So that was the purpose of making that first video. I hope that clears things up from some things that I got wrong and oversimplified in the first video. And I appreciate all the comments and everybody that was willing to chip in. It's taught me a lot. So thank you, and have a good rest of your day.